if you ever use this phrase, that's just how I am, it's probably it most likely
justifying a false.
It's like something's not right in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
That is going to help you. That's just how I am is a great way to search out this false self.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with S.J. Jennings.
That's all we do.
That's what we do. Exploring the kingdom.
Hang out.
And talking about things that matter to us. and
whether or not they matter to you,
maybe.
Leave a message in the comment section below.
And so we've been on this series that its number is yet to be determined. But the big question that started all this was: is biblical masculinity really? Is it really helping? Is
that something we want to strive for?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And yet it's a very it's a very significant description when it comes to manhood, especially in the faith community. So biblical masculinity is the conversation, and I think just to reinstate for this session, it is. The effect of it is, maybe it's concerning. The Bible is important, so important. But when we look at biblical masculinity and what we've been trying to do under that banner for the last 30, 40 years, then it's just an interesting conversation to explore. And you know my heart, SJ. So much of this, I'm a big Dallas Willard apprentice and love his teaching, his way. And there's others, but I would say for Willard, he was very much about the kingdom, and because Jesus was very much about the kingdom. So when we look at biblical masculinity and we look at Jesus, let's just talk about what Jesus talked about. And I think that's what we're after in this series. And, I think it's not a lack of it's not for the lack of Christian men knowing the Bible. So they know the truth, but the truth is not necessarily setting them free.
Yeah. Just to pause there for a second, my experience has been personally and observationally that men know the scripture. They don't know how to apply it to their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, there's how do I translate this that sounds really good?
Yeah.
And makes a lot of sense. And well, shoot, Jesus said it, so I should probably do that.
Yeah.
But there's something in the way, which is what we're going to talk about today, them being able to take what they know. And we don't have a lack of information.
Yeah.
That's not the problem.
And we've seen, like we've said in the other podcast, just to say it again up front on the beginning of this, and we've seen faith leaders fall hard in the last 18 months. Yeah. And so what we've been bringing is a reevaluation. Let's talk about this. Yeah. And might it be time to run some different plays? Mm-hmm. Might it be time to equip men a little differently if something isn't working, well, generationally, right? Because it's the next generation that masculinity should be bestowing masculinity. It should be inviting younger men, explorers and warriors, and our fathers to our sons, and boys being brought up in a community of faith, that being an image bearer matters. They find identity in that. So we've been talking about identity. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about image bearing. We've been talking about worth and value in inherently. Is that the word I want? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That this is in you already. Mm-hmm. And so now, as we turned the corner last week in talking about warfare, we're diving a little bit deeper into some of the intricacies of warfare, the unholy trinity. Yeah. Like we brought up last week.
Some of the strategies.
Yeah. We want to talk about particularly in this episode, the battle that happens within, and how the enemy the kingdom of darkness does get an upper hand by working in and through the masculine journey to establish this inside thing. Mm-hmm. I don't even want to call it a person. No. I don't want to give it an identity, but call it a thing now. No. Because there's something at work in us that is used by the enemy in many, many ways, almost to where you're just on autopilot. They don't have to.
I just said no, even though I agreed with you. It's one of those. No. Right. Anyway, it's almost a way for the enemy to get us to do his work for him.
And that's why we want to talk about the false self in this session. So we'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast in just a minute.
Men are seeing higher suicide rates in this country, and
I think a lot of young men are actually looking
emotionally
beyond
so-called
that
toxic
question.
masculinity.
How did masculinity end up here? Being known for causing harm, being violent, overpowering, and unsafe, and being relationally destructive or relationally absent. This is not who men were created to be. Men have been the target of a long and brutal assault by an enemy that knows what we might become and fears it. At Zoe, we believe that if men are a big part of the problem in culture today, men could be a big part of the solution. What if masculinity was safe and loving? What if masculinity was adventurous and encouraging? What if men were brave and empathetic, engaging and helpful? What if masculinity looked like Jesus, kind and strong? What if men were no longer dangerous, but dangerous for good?
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. And yes, the Dangerous for Good Men's Summit are a part of our Kingdom Masculinity offer. You know, places that we're going and taking this, instead of kind of hosting our retreats, we're trying to get out there with a few of these pieces that can help men at least get moving in the right direction. I thought about this because we're preparing for Houston, and then we've got Greenville, South Carolina, and some other things still this year. Yeah, this idea of the truth, biblical truth, and these answers. I like what you said before the break, SJ. It's not necessarily getting across that chasm of application or experiential. Guys aren't connecting the dot out there. And I think the difference between biblical masculinity in general and kingdom masculinity for us is this subject of warfare. Yeah. You like I said last week, if we're not talking about warfare and how it works and helping men see it, you know, you wouldn't send a man into battle without training him in the ways of battle and warfare.
If you do, then and the guy happens to survive, when he comes back, he's going to be like, bro, what?
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah.
You know, like you had.
Why didn't you tell me what?
Yeah. When you look at Band of Brothers, you know, and they're at training camp and he's throwing, you know, pig guts over them and all that. I mean, right. He's training them by doing that.
Right.
You know, it's pretty graphic.
And yet when they confront the enemy for real,
it's like,
holy cow.
Even with that intense training. Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting. I was watching Monday Night Football last night, and I love to watch Monday Night Football with the Manning brothers. So it's Peyton and Eli Manning. You know, I think it's on ESPN too. And they are talking about the game from the perspective of two Super Bowl winning quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But also as brothers, so they just hassle each other, you know. And well, last night they have Bill Belichick on there. I'm a Patriots fan, love Bill Belichick. And he's just into the banter with them. And a play happens on the field, and a guy just blew the coverage. He followed to back up a cornerback. The safety followed the cornerback and this wide receiver off into the corner and left the tight end wide open on a seam route. So what I thought was interesting about that was, rather than like, wow, that guy sucks, he blew that coverage, Peyton says to Bill, now Bill, in after postgame, how would you coach that guy?
Great question.
I mean, just that idea and the difference between, man, you really screwed that. They got a touchdown because of you, and you blew the coverage, and you should have known better.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, coach, you know, how are you going to train this guy up, because he needs a little more training? You know, it's the coach's responsibility in that case.
Yeah.
Right. So translate that into kingdom masculinity.
Yeah. The first word that comes to mind is misread. You misread it.
Completely.
So either the quarterback misreads the coverage, or the coverage misreads the assignment. And I think that's why, you know, we talked about some weeks ago, we can't keep playing 4th and 5th and 6th grade football. Not as a man. The stakes are way too high.
Yeah. And
there's so much going on as we've tried to share through this journey through Kingdom Masculinity. And I'll have Caleb put this link on this. I mean, if you want a 30, 40 minute teaching session on the 2 realms and 2 kingdoms, kind of in its entirety, in the context of that, then go to our website, go to YouTube, and I'll have Caleb drop that in there. So you can
zoe.org/2R2K, 2 realms, 2 kingdoms.
And you can watch that and begin to become oriented to the things that if you don't take into account what's going on, and you're just watching the ball. How many guys do you see, you know, even on an interception, they're just running after the ball. They have no idea who is coming to clock them.
Yep.
And so same thing in to be ambushed over and over and over again by the enemy's work in your marriage, in your fatherhood, and in your own perception of yourself.
Absolutely.
And not give account or credit to this idea that there's a false self is a brutal way to live.
Oh man.
You'll blow the same tire again and again in the same ditch again and again.
Yep.
And there's casualties, because the older you get, the further you are on your masculine journey, the more closer to king and the king stage, the more responsibility you have for the hearts of others.
So there's more involved when you get taken down or lose a play or lose a game. Yesterday, again, you know, football, one more time, Chargers, Cardinals, long bomb, touchdown. You know, I mean, this guy's just running like there's nobody around him. Out of nowhere, here comes a DB. And on the 1 yard line, punches the ball out. It goes out through the end zone. So now it's a touchback. So instead of that moment of, we got a touchdown, it's
what just
the
happened?
other team has the ball. And the guy's standing there like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, and how many times has that happened? Right?
I mean, we could go to town with more and more of this, but I think of head on a swivel. Yeah. You know, you're just paying attention to what's going on. So let's dive into this some more because there's more than we have time to cover in a session. But the context of this again is a kingdom man is a man who understands a level of play, a level of engagement that would be similar not to the grade school ways, but taking those same principles of fundamentals of any game or of any tactics and playing an instrument, whatever it is, you have your chords that you learn, you know, your basic chords.
Yeah.
But as you advance, those chords are still in the game.
They are.
The way that you stand, the way that you move, it's still a part of the fundamentals of the game. And yet you move differently. You play differently as you advance. And I think we've got a crisis of men still in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade of faith communities when it comes to overcoming some things in their story and in their masculine hearts, so that they could become who they really are. So let's just kick. You have the definitions.
I have definitions, yeah, man, and I want to start the. I've got the 2 or 3 sentence definitions of the true self and the false self. But even before that, I just want to share this. There's something in the way of us fully experiencing God's love. This false self or way that each of us develop to move through life to arrange for love. It's familiar, but it's not us, and yet it's in us, right?
Right.
It's an operating system of hiding, proving, and fearing, supported and advanced by our thoughts and habits. Like Adam and Eve, we hide, although we may not even realize when it's happening, right? Yeah. So then, I'm going to start with the false self.
Who did that?
I wrote that.
That's beautiful.
I stole all yours. Most of your stuff. Some from Tom Benner.
Yeah.
I would have given you credit if I took it from a book. But
So we're talking about an operating system that's at work. We're talking about algorithms, to use some other terms that are functioning. When Google and all they want to know where you are. Will you allow for this? Will you allow for
location
that?
services,
location services, and cookies and all that stuff. They're collecting data on you. Before this happened in technology, there's something similar that's been happening in the battle over you between the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light.
Yep.
And so, before we define some more of these things about false self and true self, I just want to add that we're not the first ones talking about this. As a matter of fact, we've had other instructors, other teachers, other guides and coaches and counsel on this subject. The scriptures talk about it a lot as the flesh, the old nature, which we're going to look at Galatians 5 in a little bit, the sin nature. Somehow, when you become a Christian, that doesn't just melt off of you and go away. Something residual, something significant, even powerful comes with you even into the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so how you move, this is why the letters to the churches in the first century are all talking about this challenge. And if you're dealing with sin, you're dealing with a behavior in many ways.
Like we mentioned last time, too far
Where
downstream.
we want to go is way up to the motivational centers, to the places that if you can be remodeled, renovated, even restored there, then this doesn't happen.
Right. Because the downstream
renewing of your mind, you think differently, you believe things differently, and I like what you said even in that last summary about, we're really talking about the significance of having a chance to move more and more and more like our King, our Savior, our Shepherd, Jesus. And so I want to say that means that there's something in there that, like we said a few weeks ago, can be moved. Like, you have the equipment to do this. And you have the coaches, the counsel, the King, the Father, the Spirit to guide and walk with you in this.
Yep.
But they don't just zap it off of you.
No.
They are wanting your will, and now you got a chance because you just don't have a sin nature. Now you have a new nature, Paul says. And so all of these scriptures, all these letters to the epistles, man, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
What has authority in your life?
Yep.
And if it's your flesh or your false self, the old man, Eldridge calls it the poser.
Richard Rohr calls it the shadow side.
Shadow self.
So we're not the first ones to talk about this. Dolby talks about it too, doesn't he? Yeah. So the
imposter, John Lynch, I think, and masks. John Lynch talks about the masks that we wear. So all of that stuff, and I love what you said before. One more thing, that if what we're made for as image bearers is being in an intimate relationship with God and a love affair with God, then this thing is in the way. It's in the way of the flow. It's blockage. It's encumbering. It's not helpful. And after we kind of define it, I want to go into, well, where did this parasite come from?
Yeah, it's a this
so we'll
is a way more simplistic way to talk about it. But like if you and I have some kind of a beef with each other, that's between us in our relationship until it gets resolved. So this false self is way more complicated than that. Just like, I made you mad somehow. No, this is a system that gets put in place at a young age for you to, as I said, arrange for love and provide for yourself in some way. But really what you're providing for is this false self creature that's being developed. And there's a reason that you develop this thing, and it gets developed for you.
Yeah.
So let me give you the definition of the false self. A defensive facade lacking spontaneity and leaving one feeling dead and empty, only having the mere appearance of being real. Also known as the flesh, the old man, who you were before Jesus rescued you. And then the true self, a sense of self based upon a spontaneous and authentic experience and a feeling of being truly alive. This is who God created you to be and how you bear his image, who you are in Christ, the new man, rescued and redeemed. Yeah, and we've talked about it before, and even in the context of marriage. Shout out to Caleb and Jay Rachel, who just got engaged this past week.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
She said yes.
She said yes.
Show him that ring. That's right. Show him that ring. That's good.
When you talk about getting married and being young, typically when you get married, you're bringing a lot of your true self to the table in that. Initially,
especially in courtship, I've said and shared that. I think we when we put our best foot forward, that's in you.
That's an idiom that explains putting your best foot forward is oftentimes your true self. Not always, but oftentimes can be.
Motives
your true
matter,
self.
and that's what we're talking about, motives. But yeah.
So it's in, even if you are like us in our 20s, but 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Now, sheesh. Maybe you feel like for so long as you're listening, like, oh my gosh, I've never heard about this before, or I've heard these guys talk about it before, but now I really get it. This guy's been running the show. This thing's been running the show. Is there hope for me to get free from this thing? And the reason I bring all that up and talk about putting your best foot forward is, yes, there is a true self in there. And if you think about it and you stop and think about it, you can start to recognize when you're operating out of it.
Out of the false self.
Right.
Yes.
You can be awakened to which one you're operating out of.
Oh, man.
I mean, thinking of those times.
Talk about triggers.
Oh, man.
Go ahead, though.
The authentic experience and a feeling of being truly alive. So just, listeners, if you're driving, don't do this, but close your eyes for a second and just think about that moment in your life, and what that was like. That's a glimpse of what your true self is and what it feels like to operate out of it.
I want to just add that, your true self isn't on the side of the enemy, isn't on the side of darkness. When you're in your true self, you are not going to sin.
That's right. And
that's why it's so critical to go after this false self creature. Because it is the thing that is the greatest contributor to your failures. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that because we know in Jesus' story, he lived true self dominant, overran with true self. He knew who he was.
He couldn't not.
Yes.
Right.
And yet somehow he was tempted and did not sin. So we understand that the false self is this creature that is at work. And I thought about this. Another way to say this would be, if you have cancer, the cancer's not you, but it's at work in you.
That's right.
And so that's the idea of the false self. It's a problem. It can infect every area of your life. And I do want to make sure we make some time for a couple stories. So let me give you a false self sighting in my world that came up just a few months.
Maybe we won't have time for mine.
A few months ago. But the idea, and I'll get into Galatians 5 in a minute, but man, a great thing to observe is when you're angry. What makes you angry and how angry are you? Anger is this emotion that very few of us have a righteous anger. Mostly it's just things
it's a secondary emotion primarily.
Things not doing, going in our attempts to control things. So anyway, the story was at my home front in the kitchen. I had said some things to one of my daughters, and who was home visiting, and went one step across the line of making sure that my point got across, making sure that she heard me, that kind of thing. And when I did it, I could see her, how it impacted her, how it affected her. It was that, Dad, why do you do that? Kind of thing. And I knew I had gone. I even knew when I came up to the line. But I went across that line. Okay, does that make sense?
You guys have talked about it before, and I think it was Barkalow. Well, it's you and Barkalow both. Your true self's off to the side, just kind of
waving,
watching the false self go over the falls.
Because it's like in a tag team, your true self's not even getting in the game.
Right.
Because false self does not tag out.
No.
Not once it can get in, especially if you're dominant, false self. So anyway, what happened next is she left the room, and I knew it. And I was frustrated with myself because I saw it didn't respond how I wanted to, didn't do what I needed to do.
Blew the coverage.
Blew the coverage. And then my wife, sweet Robin, she then is right there in this whole moment and says, honey, and so this is a great description of the false self. I wheeled on her, snapped my finger and said, hey, the last thing I need right now is a mother.
Ooh.
So false self is notorious for from bad to worse. So now, she's
not just growling.
She's eyebrows up.
It's biting now.
She's eyebrows up. And what I was beginning to work on was, I knew what I had done. Okay. But here's the crazy thing about this whole story. So I'm talking to my counselor a week or so later. And yes, part of the counseling process is bringing, carrying in your pockets, bringing, what you want to talk about.
I got an F.
I gotta talk about this. And I really thought the counselor was going to say, yeah, Robin shouldn't have done that in that moment. I really thought he was going to say, yeah, she shouldn't have. And what he said was, Michael, is that what you think a mother is?
Yeah.
And it was revelatory.
Yeah,
it was,
unraveled.
Oh my gosh. And I say that story because there are things that have happened to us that are cause and effect. And tapes were playing, and here I am in a moment of a mistake. And I don't even know if Robin was going to put her arms around me. All she said was, Michael. I didn't even let her.
No,
I have no idea what she was going to say.
It was not available to you in that moment. You were over the fall.
And so what the counselor did was what we invite men to do. He took me to a place like, when did you learn that behavior? When did you learn that way? What is it? Tell me, let's talk about your mom. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to talk about my mom.
Yeah, you were supposed to come to my defense.
I want to talk about why I was
Good
right.
counselor.
Why I was right and she was wrong.
Yeah.
And no. That was not. It was
That's
beautiful.
way too far downstream.
It was a beautiful invitation. And so, yeah, in my experience, that's how my heart was treated when I was younger. And reinforced in multiple places and stages of my life of make a mistake, critical voices, and now I've got to prove that I either didn't mean it or you deserved it.
Yeah. Somehow it's your fault. Yeah.
And
misinterpreting
neither
my
one
heart
of those are good options. So that's how powerful the false self can be in a moment. And that was not too long ago. And I feel like we've done a lot of work in this thing. So as you said before, gosh, to recognize that you have this thing that I think it's in Heart of a Warrior. I call it, what do I call it? My
The old shirt?
No, the old shirt's one of them. But my insane friend.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's,
You talked about it as the dog that gets out of the cage. You know, he's growling in the cage, and if you let him out and he bites somebody,
you're responsible.
You're responsible.
He will pin that on you. You know, so that's where this Jekyll Hyde and internal conflict. You know, I'm not
Romans 7.
I'm not going as far as schizophrenic, but it is the Romans 7 dilemma that why do I do this?
I know what I want to do.
Yes.
Not what I should do,
Right.
what I want to do.
And
right?
and am I allowing or am I inviting? Because that even set in motion. I'm not bringing to God my mistakes. I'm trying to get in the penalty box just long enough for him to calm down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that I won't get even more criticized or this language of a 2x4 that people use. That, God's 2x4. No,
that's not what a loving being does.
No, intimacy, connectedness, love, and even counsel from the Holy Spirit and guidance from the Holy Spirit, being kind. So I think that this is a huge piece of masculinity, biblical. If this is not a part of the agenda within biblical masculinity, I think it's a part of the huge problem. And we're not talking about sin. We're talking about the agent at work that actually sets you up to sin.
Yeah.
And so and I want to talk about, so where's this thing come from? You know, what is this false self thing? How does it get its power? How does it get its ability? How does it get its strength? And if we could talk just a little bit about, it happened over time in your story through the experiences that you had with people, authority figures primarily, who were handling your heart. Hey, when you were a little guy, mom and dad didn't always handle your heart well. I'm not saying that, you didn't make mistakes and need correction, but oh my gosh.
Right.
And you start learning in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade how the world works and how to be safe, how to make life work, or at least try to prevent life from not working.
It's an operating system of hiding, proving, and fearing. Like we talk about, Jesus is a man with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear.
Yeah.
So that's the true self-image, right? The image of God. It's the image we're made in. We're image bearers. We have that Trinity DNA in us.
Yeah.
And yet we come up with this operating system, or it's forced upon us, I think it's more like it's just waiting for that moment. Whatever your moment was, maybe it was with your mom, based on the story you just told.
You're saying to capitalize on that moment and have it interpreted inaccurately.
Exactly. And then he's like, okay, so if I'm going to get love from anybody, I got to be good and make sure they know I'm good. Or I've got to, in my story, I've got to be helpful to arrange for love, right? And so here comes this thing that implants, it's like a virus on your computer. It gets downloaded on you in this moment of vulnerability and weakness. Not that those two are the same thing, but as a little guy, little women too, little girls, we're in this moment of vulnerability and weakness, and here comes this vow based on what happened to you, the agreement made associated with it. And then it's like, I will always make sure that I'm needed. So because I'll always be loved.
I'll never have the wrong answer again.
Yep.
That's how you make valedictorians.
Yes. Yes.
I will always be prepared for any and every situation. That's where you have.
It's a great indicator. Like if you're looking at a radar screen, anytime you see always and never, they pop up as blips in the search for the root of this false self thing.
Yeah. Why does this always happen to me? You know, what's...
Yep. She always says that to me, or he always does that. Oh my gosh.
And all of it, what the beautiful thing about what you're saying is that, and I'll go back to Belichick. How would you coach that guy after the game? How would you, so to live this way as a kingdom man and kingdom masculinity, there has got to be reflection. There's got to be some other people in your life who are on a similar journey with their eyes on your life. That, like my counselor said, like, is that what you think? Not at all what I was.
Yeah, you were not going to ask yourself
thinking.
That question.
I was already justified in how I responded.
That's right.
And to then, you know, what he provoked was, you know, an apology to Robin, an apology to my daughter, and that's not. Now, I can't say that's not me. It was my false self. You don't blame me. It was like, no, if your dog bites, you know, you're responsible. But it's a clue to what is operating in you. What kind of system is moving, and what does it cause you to do? Because we talked earlier about passivity. Is it? I gotta just shut down, or is it the passive aggressive?
Or the aggressive.
Or aggressive, exactly.
Yeah. So I think Caleb just gave us the high sign, but if you'll just respond to this thing that I've heard you say 100 times, if you're the center of the story, you're living in way too small of a story. So the false self will arrange for itself to be the center of the story.
Yeah.
That's just how it operates.
Yeah.
That's its reason for being.
Yeah.
Is to make sure that you are somehow, some way, you being the carrier of this host, the center of the story.
Yeah. So
how does that relate to this whole conversation about true self, false self, larger story?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I want to say again, it's a little bit complicated.
It is,
and it's because we're moving out of 4th, 5th, and 6th grade science and anatomy and into higher levels of awareness and understanding and experience, that you're starting to see, you know, that there's a certain way you're moving and it's not good.
Yeah, the game you hear it talked about, and you experienced it, you know, playing beyond college in basketball, but you hear players talk about the game just gets faster and faster.
Yeah, and it's not just the strong survive, the smart. You know, you still have to have an IQ at this game, and I think as men in their 40s, 50s, you know, hopefully you've worked some crap out, and with the help of God, you know, not let me go work this out and then present myself to God. That even in itself is a part of a system that is not accurate. So before I launch into a couple thoughts, I think we're so inundated with performance and therefore conditional love based on our performance. I mean, our culture right now in social settings, social media, it's all about the like. You know, and am I putting something out there? And we get that, you know, we're trying to use some of our platforms to encourage and equip people, you know, that would invite them and support them in their faith journey. And so, yeah, we get excited that there's 50,000 downloads of a YouVersion Bible app. That's exciting. And yet, but like in Kipling's, you know, poem, you know, but if you can be high and you can be low and you're okay, right? Then that's the point, you know, that you can move in both of those circles well. So when you think about the false self, to your question about how this joker has gotten the run of the house, and your true self is the one that's too often locked in the closet. And it's interpreting everything in ways to either self-promote, self-protect, and every other self you can imagine in there. That's what we're talking about. So you've got to see it. That's what Belichick in the game film. To be able to see it is huge. Yeah, like I was even justified in mine.
That's the coaching. Like, if the coach is supposed to be in that realm the most knowledgeable, highest football IQ. The player on the field has a lot of IQ, but makes a mistake, and so now the coach can come in and if he's a good coach, that's a
great point.
Can say, okay, man, how do you think it went? Well, I went this way. I should have gone that way. Okay, let me show you why.
Mm-hmm.
Because they tricked you with this, and here's this guy convinced you the ball was going over there, and it really was going over here.
Yeah. By the time somebody really falls over this, the setup has been happening. Mm-hmm. Even the coordinator up in the stands who's watching and says, "Hey, let's run this play.
Mm-hmm. He's out of position.
Let's be opportunistic here and take advantage of." That's all the kind of language of the kingdom of darkness. It's just brutal. So. I think about your question about, so there are things that happened to me as a boy that shape me, and not all of them good. So I want to be very careful to say that surgically that some of this cancer gets on good tissue. So Mike, little boy,
little Mikey.
Yeah, the parts of me that are young, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about getting off of him what was put on him as a boy. I think we should treat our younger parts, our younger selves, with a holy kindness and care. But, and yes, so maybe that boy learned how to hide, because when Dad came home drunk, it was scary as crap. And so you could say, it's not my favorite statement at all, that somehow that hiding served him, as a boy.
Protected him, yeah.
Because of the elements, because of the players, because of the people in his life.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it gets really interesting, and I know it's just my opinion maybe it kept him from getting hit more, if that's what you mean by served him. He learned how to pretend to be asleep, so his dad had no reason to come in. Or I don't know what different people's stories might be, but I do know that some of those protective and promotional things, you'll hear the story about a boy or girl who acts out, and they're promoting themselves that way just to get attention.
Yeah. Well,
did it really serve them? So it's a very interesting technical idea. But the surgery, is still required, and to get some of these things out and off is just so important. How do you minimize the growth of this false self thing? Well, if you have certain conditions in the physical realm, like, if you eat a bunch of sugar, it has a toxic response in your system.
Right.
So there's a lot of great parallels in that. But where I would go with this is to say that you got to see it, and you sometimes need some help seeing it, but to bring it to the Father and say, I don't want this at work in me anymore. And I think getting some distance. We've had some conversations, and I've had conversations with men. I always do stupid crap, and I always blow up, and and they identify themselves even in that space.
Yes.
And I would say
I've got such a short temper.
I would say technically, no, that's a part of you that needs treatment, that needs
the false self.
Needs attention, that needs care from the Father. It's a part of you that's not you, but it will take the stage and wreak havoc not only on you but everybody else around you. So I think getting to see it is a really huge first step. Secondly,
let me jump
treatment
in with this one that maybe will be helpful with seeing it, because it was helpful to me, and it's a simple thing. If there's a part of your life where you and a part of what you consider yourself, where you were just say, if you ever use this phrase, that's just how I am, it's probably it most likely
justifying a false.
It's like something's not right in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
That is going to help you. That's just how I am is a great way to search out this false self thing.
And there's Caleb's going. We got, but there's just so much more in this. That's why in Heart of a Warrior, before you can turn that corner and become the beloved son, you've got to deal with this thing that is at work in you.
Because it will skew everything.
So 8 chapters of circling that airport a couple times on the false self. Same thing with King Me. When we talk about the masculine journey, we lay out, here's what happens in this stage. Here's what happens in this stage. And if it doesn't go well, it leaves a mark. It leaves space. And I just want to, Galatians 5, if you want any one reference about false self, true self, and the spirit-directed life, that's the true self, and the flesh-directed life, that's the false self. That's it. And Paul goes into it in Galatians 5, and I'm just going to say, hey, man, read the Amplified version of that, not just your NIV.
That's right.
And then read your Message version, because they're brutal. The false self is brutal in how it operates and what the signs of it are. I got to do this, Caleb. Hang in there, man. Galatians 5, 19 about the false self. It's obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless.
That's too small of a story.
That's right. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community. I could go on. Paul says I could go on.
I forgot about that. I mean, you could really? You could?
I mean,
sheesh.
It's the worst parts of us. And when he goes on that rant, you can see how Eugene Peterson translated your Galatians 5, 19 to 21. But they are sightings of the false self-flesh, the old man, the old nature, and he's saying in Galatians 5. He contrasts that with a life in the Spirit. Yeah. Love, joy, peace, patience. I mean,
absolutely.
It's this battleground that so much of warfare has to be fought. And if you're not fighting, if you're not training, if you're not getting healing from the things that the enemy has on you, we talked about it before, in your file that is in your algorithm, in your operating system, the file work is what really is significant to being a kingdom man and to progressing in kingdom masculinity and not doing. C.S. Lewis said, the real torture is if you haven't done this work and you're in your 70s and 80s, it's worse. It's bad because you didn't treat it when you were younger. You didn't bring these files to God and say, I don't want this.
I know anymore. Something's not right about this, but I'm just not going to do it.
To not go get blood work, to not go get x-rays, to not go get...
well, this is what I think of when there was a time where I heard this passage, this Galatians 5 in the Message, and I was like, done that. Yep,
that's me.
And that's stage, the first stage. Now, that's intel.
Yeah.
Just like they have files on us, we have files on them. Yeah. So this is not meant to be an accusation.
Yeah.
this is information. This is intel for you as a kingdom man
to move,
to be able to suss this thing out. If I can say that as a 53-year-old, suss this thing out and find it so you can get rid of it.
Yeah, it's very hard to put to death these things if you can't get your hands on it or get a hold of it or see the X-rays. And the X-rays just show you the MRI just shows you what's not right.
Yeah.
That's at work in you.
Right.
And I think
X-rays don't heal you. MRIs don't heal you.
So if we're gonna move forward as men, landing this, Caleb, I promise. If we're gonna move forward as men, kingdom masculinity, biblical masculinity, this is ground zero. Because for you to be good for the hearts of others, which is part of the man description. Why did he make a man?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have the Father namesake, capital F, small f, Father?
Can you be dangerous for good, not just dangerous?
Yeah. What does it look like to get this stuff out of the way of receiving the love of God that will transform you? And I'm not saying, not just reading about it, not just theologically, not just biblically, even though that we got playbooks. They're important, but you have to be able to play this way, or you get, you're the. I saw the funniest clip the other day. It was Kramer in a dojo with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and he's chopping them down. That's just. Seinfeld is just.
That's a great clip,
but
man.
it's like
as the false self, man. That's good.
What in the world is going on?
Because it is comical in many ways. I mean,
and it's embarrassing.
And it
gets really embarrassing when this thing runs around.
I remember we used to use a clip from Brian Regan, the Me Monster.
Me Monster.
Yeah, or do a YouTube search of that.
Or our famous the famous Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, the black suit.
Don't let any of that stuff get on you. After
he already has.
It has the characteristics of a symbiote. It needs a host, and that's how I would land this and say, this is a battle that actually you can win because the love of God, the power of Christ crucified in you, you can overcome these things, and that's why it's just a ground zero for orientation, for kingdom masculinity. Yeah. We walk guys into this over a couple sessions and a couple opportunities for them to go review some film from their lives, see what God wants to talk about, and begin to give him access to all those files. Yeah. And you can't just always do it in the appointment that you want. Sometimes what the enemy is trying to use you for is intel for that moment of, wait, this is what we're talking about. This is what I have not seen, and it's not the addiction. It's far upstream. Yeah. To what is the cause of that? And so anyway, I think this is a good one to land on, and then I think we have one more warfare part to really talk about in terms of kingdom masculinity, and then we can press on into a few other things like the glory of your life. And if
image bearing.
We're not talking about that. What being restored to what? Overcoming to become what?
That's good. Yeah. So if you've got a false self story, maybe you're able to.
Yeah, you didn't get to share yours.
Point out, I didn't get to share mine. Maybe next time we'll have time for that. They're so few and far between. Yeah, there it is right there. But if you got false self stories that you want to share with us, you've been on this journey. Maybe this was revelatory, and you're
we'd be glad to read them on air.
We'd glad to read them on air. We'll not use your name, but
I've got in the book. There's plenty of mine in the books.
I think the day that this is being released also is Election Day. Is that right? You got that on here, Caleb? Wow. So very impactful day. We'll see what happens. But you know what? The kingdom is bigger than all of it. So
true.
Yeah. We know how this book ends. So
yes, and it's moving in that. It's moving in that direction regardless. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this Exploring More podcast session. Get out there, explore Galatians 5. I invite you to look at some of the videos that we made available in this session, and let's keep going after what it means to be a kingdom man. Nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. And that's a man like Jesus who's dangerous for good. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.